The deception with tact. Just what are you trying to say? You got a blank face, which irritates. Communicate, pull out your body piece. You see dimensions into. State your case with black or white. But when one little cross leads to shots, scratch your teeth. You run for cover so discreet. Why don't they do what they say? Say what you mean. One thing leads to another. You told me something wrong. I know I listened too long, but then one thing leads to another.
Hi, this is John Cullen. Welcome to another episode of Hypothetically Speaking. In this episode, we're going to be taking a look at why people believe the things they believe in the face of evidence that potentially changes over time. And it's something that I think is really important, so we're going to spend quite a bit of time on this. It's part of the cognitive bias conversation that we've talked about before. And you've seen me share this quote from Arthur Conan Doyle, Sherlock Holmes. It is of the highest importance in the art of detection to be able to recognize out of a number of facts which are incidental and which are vital. And this is so important because we're dealing with deceptive entities. We're dealing with agencies that don't want the public to know the truth about, seems like anything. And, agencies are made up of people. And so some of these people have been deployed online to distract the public from what the actual stories are. And these are the cover-ups, right? So the people who participate in the cover-up often are disguised as investigators. And what they do is they take you down a path that doesn't really have much to do with what actually happened. Be like investigating Stephen Paddock at the Las Vegas shooting. It doesn't really have much to do with it other than supplying the guns and the ammo. So what we're going to do in this show is investigate why people believe what they do, and more importantly, how do people manage their beliefs? In other words, in the face of changing evidence. Do people change their beliefs, or do they stick with their original beliefs, and what's all that about? So let's take a deeper dive into the art of detection in the age of deception. In other words, it's not 1950 anymore. We're living in an age now where it seems as if the government doesn't want the public to know the true story behind just about anything. And so I came up with a term to describe this age of deception called the Decepticene. I went to ChatGPT and asked it if that was insane. There's a term called the Anthropocene. And the Anthropocene is this period of time when human activity has become kind of the dominant influence on Earth. So things like pollution and, I guess, climate change and all that stuff. So the Anthropocene is the period where mankind has sort of become dominant compared to other periods when we had other dominant species. But the period that we've been in, I don't know, maybe since 1947, maybe since 1918 with Woodrow Wilson. It's just one deception after the other. We'll talk more about Woodrow Wilson in 1917 a little bit later. But this period of time, the Decepticene, is this period where senators can't be trusted, governors can't be trusted. And I think people were not just fed up, but exasperated. I don't think people know what to do at this point, particularly after the January 6th thing and people were getting arrested simply for showing up. But the net of it is you've got Rand Paul, Ron Johnson, all the senators pretending as if they're investigating these things. And they're not. They're helping to cover them up. And that's what makes it so infuriating. So people use the term kabuki theater. That's exactly what it is. They're putting on a show. It's very much what it is. It is a show. It is kabuki theater. And so we are living in a period right now where trying to figure out what is real and what is just nonsense has become very difficult, because the people who are making up these lies, the people who are making up these narratives, have a ton of money, and they have the ability to influence the media, if not completely control the media. So what you end up hearing is what they want you to hear. Again, this reminds me of growing up in the late 60s, early 70s, and the stories we would hear about Russia and Pravda and KGB. And it feels like that now to me here. So congratulations, guys. You're living through the Decepticene period, as I'm tagging it. Now, I did some magic the other night when I did a podcast. And I've talked about this before. Lance Burton is a pretty famous magician in Las Vegas. He's been on The Tonight Show. Johnny Carson loved the guy. And for some reason, because I was going to do the magic trick, I forgot why I looked up Lance Burton or whatever. But I guess I wanted to see if ChatGPT had the record of who came in first, second, and third at the Tannen's Magic Camp. And when I went to Lance Burton's Wikipedia page, it says in 1977, as a teenager, Burton entered his first magic competition and won that prize. But the citation that it gives is his website. That's how I ended up at his website. So I was there in 1977 when Lance Burton came in first place. And I came in third place. And I was thrilled with third place, given how good this guy was. He showed up as a teenager. Right? It was 1977, and he was born in 60. So he was 17 years old, shows up with a bunch of doves and blows everybody away. He's like in a tuxedo at 17 years old. And the guy was amazing. And so he won. The person who came in second place was also remarkably good. And I was like, and I was third. I was in shock. And ChatGPT didn't know the answer. And so I started with, where was 1977 Tannen's Magic Camp held? And ChatGPT told me it was held at the campus of Bryn Mawr College in Pennsylvania. And I said, no, it was not. And ChatGPT said, well, I'm going to argue with you. I'm right to correct myself. The 1977 Tannen's Magic Camp was held at Bryn Mawr College in Pennsylvania. So it's standing its ground. And my response was, it was held at LaSalle Military Academy on Long Island. And ChatGPT says, you're right. Tannen's Magic Camp in 1977 was held at LaSalle Military Academy on Long Island. So beware. Sometimes experience trumps AI. Pick one of these 6 cards. Memorize it. and it's gone. It's a stunning effect. It's been used again and again online. I'm going to show you how to do it when we get to the patron portion of the show. But what we're going to be focusing on in this show, confirmation bias. Seeking, interpreting, or remembering information that supports your existing beliefs. Okay? And this is common. This is the reason I'm doing this, is because a lot of these biases are very common. And therefore, if you understand them and you're like, oh, yeah, I see what this is. I see what this behavior is, whether it's in other people or yourself. So confirmation bias is when you seek or kind of interpret everything to support what it is you already think. An example of this would be there's a bunch of people who think that in the case of the Charlie Kirk killing, that his microphone exploded. And so people go looking for supportive information of that, or anything having to do with explosives, anything anywhere in the country. And anything that supports that belief is what they seek. That's called confirmation bias. There's another thing that's really, to me, the most fascinating and the most important aspect of what we're going to talk about in the next hour or two. And that's something called belief perseverance. And belief perseverance is something that I see almost all the time. And I see it when I'm a guest on other shows. I see it in comment sections. I see it in society. And this is when people continue to hold the belief even though there's new contradictory evidence. Now there's, examples of this, right? Everybody remember the Jussie Smollett story? Justice for Juicy? Right? You guys remember that?
Empire star Jussie Smollett has been beaten in a brutal homophobic and racist attack, and family and celebs are calling for justice. Hey guys, I'm Chanel Herlin, and it's 2019. When is this going to change? Jussie Smollett from the hit show Empire has been hospitalized due to a hate crime, and I've got all the details you need to know. Early this morning, Jussie was attacked outside a Subway sandwich shop in Chicago. The Chicago Police Department has said, quote, 2 unknown offenders approached him and gained his attention by yelling out racial and homophobic slurs towards him. They put a rope around Jussie's neck, and once they fled, he was hospitalized immediately. Thankfully, we have the news that he's in good condition, as this brutal attack could have turned deadly. The severity of the allegations has the authorities looking into this attack as a hate crime. And this is the freaky part. There are also reports that Fox Studios in Chicago received a death threat a week before this attack. So was this something that had been brewing for some time? Was Jussie followed? Were these offenders just waiting for the right time? It's sickening. Jussie isn't a stranger in the industry. He's been acting for nearly 3 decades, having his first featured role in 1991. He's of course also known as Jamal Lion in Empire, which is why this attack is so devastating to so many fans and celebs alike, because this guy is so respected and loved by all. Because this guy is so respected and loved by all. Because this guy is so respected and loved by all. Since this morning, his Empire family and other celebs have reacted and are showing their support. Empire co-creator, writer and producer Danny Strong tweeted 2 emotional messages where he praised Jussie before speaking about the utter terror of racism in our society. He said, quote, "He is a kind and profoundly talented soul whom I respect with all my heart. The terror of racism and homophobia has no place in our society. It is the most indecent way to live." He continued, "Whoever did this, do not forget that you are nothing but hate-filled cowards, while Jussie's talent and activism will continue to shine a bright light onto the world for decades to come." Actress Lala Anthony posted a photo of Jussie on Instagram with the caption, "I stand with you, Jussie, praying for your speedy recovery. This makes me sick to my stomach. In 2019, this is still happening. pay attention. Actress Zendaya tweeted, "This is heartbreaking and terrifying. Please pay attention to what's happening here. Sending all my love to Jussie." And comedian Margaret Cho tweeted, "No words, love to you, Jussie." TMZ's latest report is that Jussie and the rest of the Empire cast will have armed security going forward while they continue to shoot the show in Chicago. Like both Zendaya and Lala have said, pay attention. This is devastating, and we're all just thinking of Jussie and wishing him a speedy recovery. Send Jussie some well wishes down in the comments below and subscribe to our channel to stay updated with the story.
And then what happened after that? Turned out the whole thing was like a setup, like he hired guys to do this. And the people who were ranting and raving justice for Jussie, did they recant? They come out and say, wow, did I screw up? I don't think that many did. So we're going to talk about belief perseverance. We're going to talk about the backfire effect. And this is when people see new evidence that challenges a belief that they held strongly. Sometimes they'll double down and ignore the new evidence entirely.
To 150 days in jail for faking a hate crime against himself in downtown Chicago. Now, that happened back in 2019. Now, Smollett claimed that he was attacked on a freezing January night by two, quote, white supremacists wearing MAGA hats that shouted, "This is Trump country," and specifically targeted him because of his race and his sexual orientation. Of course, we now know that all of that was false. Smollett actually hired two of his associates to stage the attack, and they are now telling their story, or their side of the story, for the first time. In the new Fox Nation special, Anatomy of a Hoax, take a look at this.
So we got here with 10 minutes to spare, and we had to plan our escape route to survey the land. His building is actually right here, right above the stairs that we're going to attack him at. We made sure we got there at 2 a.m. sharp.
On the dot.
On the dot. We had no phones because he did not want us to bring any phones. He said, so we don't lose them. I don't know if that's really the reason. That's him. Is that him?
That's that Nick.
It's that Nick.
Get that Nick.
Oh, he's moving fast. Come on, let's get him.
Get that Nick.
Let's get him. As we crossed the street, we said hey to get his attention.
Hey, Nick.
Hey! He turned around, looked at us, and that's when we started yelling the famous slurs he wanted us to yell. Hey!
Aren't you that Empire?
Hey, Empire fat Nick!
This is the Cognitive Bias Codex. And I've referred to this a number of times in the past. I find it fascinating because it helps me understand how people think, how people handle information, new evidence, how people form opinions. And so I find it fascinating to study. One of the big challenges is cognitive dissonance, right? Cognitive dissonance is this emotion that makes changing your beliefs feel uncomfortable. And it's when you get this new information and it clashes with an existing belief, and it causes psychological discomfort because of inconsistency. And I'll give you an example that I experienced. For 3.5 years, I thought COVID was a cover-up of reconstructed 1918 pandemic influenza that had been reconstructed by Jeffrey Taubenberger and Terence Tumpy. And it wasn't. So I was wrong for 3.5 years. But I was close. It was another virus, very similar, not 1918 Spanish flu, but 1917 Spanish flu, according to President Trump. And when I realized what he was talking about with the 1917 was really a bird flu, and that H7N9 was really a bird flu, it's like you have that epiphany. And in the moment of the epiphany, after the goosebumps go away, you have to like rethink everything. don't know if you've seen the film The Usual Suspects. And there's like a huge reveal at the end. And when the huge reveal at the end happens, you're like, what? And you have to rethink like the whole movie. And some films, like Memento, kind of run backwards. So you're seeing the end of the movie at the beginning, and the way the movie lays out, as the movie goes on, you're better understanding the story because it's going backwards in time. When new information comes along that all of a sudden you're like, what? That's cognitive dissonance. And for me, after 3.5 years of being certain that it was Jeffrey Taubenberger and Fauci and this particular virus that they were trying to protect, the evidence indicated something different. And once I realized the evidence indicated something different, I changed. Now, I'm a bit on the spectrum, and so for me, it's not that difficult a thing to do for some reason. I don't get that invested in any one aspect of an investigation and the evidence. It's just, if there's better evidence, it's better evidence. And that's just kind of how I've been approaching stuff the whole time I've been doing this for about 9 years. So, cognitive dissonance is real. I experience it. I experienced it for weeks when I realized it was H7N9 and not H1N1. Weeks of psychological discomfort. So some people, when they experience this discomfort, tend to go back to the old view, right? And that can drive belief perseverance. Because embracing the new data requires, it's like, I got to read more stuff. I got to take this into consideration now. I got to rethink everything. And not everybody's willing to invest the time to do that, number one. And it's uncomfortable, number two. The way we work in our heads, the way we're wired, the way the brain works, we're trying to figure out, well, what facts should we remember? And we discard specifics to form kind of generalities. So when you get into the specifics, it's not really there. And we edit and reinforce some memories after the fact. So we kind of embellish certain things sometimes. And we favor simple looking options and complete information over complex, ambiguous options. What's an example of a complex, ambiguous scenario? Saudi commandos and helicopters were trying to kill MBS at the hotel upstairs. It was the Four Seasons. Would be an example of a complex, ambiguous scenario. It's like, what? How do we even know he was there? Saudis, how do we even get to that? A simple explanation is the way the mind tends to want to go. And the challenge is, each one of these events that I work on, these are all black swan events. And because they're black swan events, they tend to be complex. Right? These are cover-ups. And when you get into a cover-up, it's way more, it's wild. It's like in Butler, we had 8 shots taken. And those of you who've been following me know I'm pretty naive at the get-go. So I'm like, okay, 8 shots taken, what could have happened? And then we get to the Charlie Kirk thing. 1 shot taken. How much of a cover-up? And so we tend to want to go towards a simpler thing. And then when we see new evidence, does that cognitive dissonance cause enough discomfort that we fight it? All right. And then we get into too much information, right? We get into the, flight radar and tracking and tail numbers and time of day. And people are like, dude, I got a job. My kids got soccer. My wife's yelling at me. I got to go to this store. I don't have time to track the flight radar. And so too much information works to the advantage of the bad guys, so to speak. All right. The next thing is this thing called normalcy bias. And I'm going to play a clip for you guys from a guy named Alex Sidorenko, who's a psychiatrist who talks about this. And this is when it's never happened before. People have a really hard time believing it just happened. Now he's going to explain, he's got a thick Russian accent, but I'm going to play the video anyway. But the net of it is, think about the Vegas shooting. You got people getting shot at a concert from commandos and helicopters ostensibly. That's never happened in the United States before. Right? Then we have this meteor event in a Cure. That hasn't happened in 1,000 years. And 1,000 years ago, there was nobody there when it did happen. It was in the woods. What about the bird flu thing? When was the last time 20, 30 chicken coops burned down in a given year?
It's a huge fire.
Of a massive fire at an egg farm.
Tonight, a large fire damaged a plant southeast of Moses Lake.
Fast-moving flames tear through a barn in Bowling Green. Take a look at all of that smoke pouring out of there.
Battling 3 barn fires right now, big fires. Each building, we're told, has tens of thousands of chickens.
There are 3 chicken coops on fire.
There is a massive barn fire burning in Hickman's egg farm in Tonopah.
Nearly 300,000 chickens were trapped inside of this 3-story steel building on the outskirts of Ceres as flames and smoke took over.
Massive flames burned down a barn with tens of thousands of chickens inside in Wright County overnight.
A poultry farm fire in Lebanon County that has caused $12 million in damage.
2 chicken houses caught on fire in the Ruston community in Jones County last night.
Flames tore through a barn at a poultry farm early this morning.
Fire has destroyed a chicken house, killing thousands of chickens.
This massive fire, it happened late last night in Howard Lake, straight west of the cities on Highway 12.
News out of Pasco County. Crews battling a huge fire at a chicken farm. It's all happening on Cal-Maine Foods along Simpson Farm Lane in Dade City.
I miss, but don't be unkind. It don't mean I'm blind. Perhaps there's a thing or two I think of lying in bed I shouldn't have said, but there it is. You see, it's all clear. You are meant to be here.
These things have never happened before. And so when they do happen, it's very uncomfortable and difficult for people to kind of wrap their heads around this new paradigm, this new scenario. An example might be the Charlie Kirk killing and what I've been proposing there. That's never happened before. Certainly not on American soil. And if in fact I'm correct and what I am proposing is in fact the case, it kind of changes the landscape. And that's where normalcy bias kicks in. Let me play this clip for you. This is Alex Sidorenko talking about normalcy bias and how if it's never happened before, it's very difficult for people to embrace it at all.
Normalcy bias. It basically means that most people, and this is very important, most people on the planet fail or actively refuse to plan or account for events that have never happened before. We have an inbuilt state where we think the future will be a reflection of the past. And just because something never happened before, our brain, if we don't switch to sort of system 2 thinking, which I'll talk about in a separate video, our brain will convince ourselves that it is highly unlikely that something will happen that has never happened before.
So that's Alex. Now, that's normalcy bias. That's just one of them. And that's one of the early ones. And so again, with normalcy bias, think back to the footage from the Las Vegas shooting, where the people at the concert keep saying things like, oh, that's just fireworks, that's just fireworks. And there's, a handful of people, a dozen maybe, that were able to see through the fog of war and see the helicopters. Right? Dog walking guy was not in the midst of the gunfire. So he sees balls of fire, falling off the sides of these choppers and goes, what the hell's that I'm looking at? But the people who are in the midst of the gunfire, like Rachel, Clarissa, are looking up and going, what the hell is that? And they see the helicopters. And it's rare, right? Why don't we have hundreds of people coming forward to see it? Because normalcy bias kicks in and people are like, that's impossible. That's never happened before. And there's a couple other key biases that I wanted to listen to here that this gentleman's going to talk about and kind of walk us through with a couple of his cartoons. So let's listen to a couple of these others because they're kind of the anchors for all this stuff.
Let's get into it. Number 1 is anchoring bias. We humans usually completely rely on the first information that we receive, no matter how reliable that piece of information is when we take decisions. The very first information has tremendous effect on our brain. Number 5, confirmation bias. We tend to listen to information that confirms what we already know, or even interpret the information that we receive in a way that confirms the current information that we already have. Let's say that your friend believes that sweets are unhealthy. This is generally a pretty broad belief. He will only focus on the information that confirms what we already know. He is more likely to click on videos that confirm that belief, or read articles that support his argument. He doesn't go through and type, positive health effects of increasing blood glucose levels, or positive effects of eating a bowl of ice cream. No, he will instinctively go to Google and type in, how bad is sugar for you? The confirmation bias is very dangerous in scientific situations, and is actually one of the most widely committed cognitive biases. Number 6, the ostrich bias. This is the decision, or rather subconscious decision, to ignore the negative information. It may also be an indication we only want to consider the positive aspects of something. This goes beyond not only looking for the positive information, but this is when there is negative information, and we choose to ignore it as an outlier. Sometimes, even when we have a problem, we try to ignore it thinking it will go away. Let's say you have an assignment to do. It's not something that you really want to do, so you may just keep on procrastinating with it, because your mind thinks that it'll go away, or is solved by ignoring it. Smokers usually, they know it's bad for their health, but a lot of them keep ignoring the negative implications of cigarettes, thinking it will not damage them or might stop them before anything serious will happen, because they consider themselves an outlier. To avoid finding out negative information, we just stop looking for it. Now, this could be a serious crime in many scientific research laboratories, and basically promotes ignorance. No. Number 11, selective perception. I like this one. Selective perception is a form of bias that causes people to perceive messages and actions according to their frame of reference. Using selective perception, people tend to overlook and forget that contradicts their beliefs or expectations. Let's say, for example, you're a smoker and you're a big fan of soccer. You are more likely to ignore all the negative advertisements about cigarettes because since you are already smoking, you have this perception that it's okay to smoke. But if there's an advertisement about soccer, you are more likely to notice it because you have a very positive perception about it. This is actually something really interesting and has to do with how you perceive the world due to your subconscious mind and what it filters out.
All right, belief perseverance is really the cornerstone of what I want to talk about here. Everything else is kind of the setup for it. So, in other words, normalcy bias, anchoring bias, availability heuristic bias, all work against you. And what that creates is something called belief perseverance. And this is when you've seen people that have formed a belief from their first exposure to a story, and then new evidence comes in, and that evidence is not supportive of that belief. It's contrary to that belief. and people don't update the belief. An example of this might be Sandy Hook. At the very beginning, people were saying, "Oh, this is not real," and then it's very real, absolutely real. And the fact that some people were saying it, the fact that Alex Jones was saying it, made it worse. Same sort of thing I think happened with the Vegas shooting. There were people who were saying it was a op, it was rubber bodies and stuff like that. And so, then the evidence comes out that no, people were dead and people were shot, and people don't update their beliefs. And for me, this is fascinating, right? Because I go appear on radio shows and stuff like that, and other podcasts all over the place. And when I share new evidence, the reaction is, either one of, wow, this is wild, this is crazy, how come we've never seen this? Or belief perseverance. People tend to cling to the old stuff, and particularly when you're getting exposed to all this new evidence during a broadcast. And so, for example, I've done broadcasts with people in Australia. I've done broadcasts, radio shows in St. Louis. And some of these people are not familiar with my work, and I show up with all this crazy stuff. And I don't really make crazy claims, but oftentimes the introduction to my work is based on the conclusions. And so people are like, what? How is that even possible? So belief perseverance is really the thing that fascinates me, that I wanted to dig into. And so I asked the AI engine to help me illustrate it with an infographic. And so this was generated by ChatGPT, this infographic, and as I reviewed it, it seems pretty on the money. So some things it gets right, magic camp it doesn't get right. So this is what I mean. You got to be careful, right? So you don't just generate this thing and go to press with it. You got to look at it. So let's step through this together. It begins at the beginning where a belief is formed. My belief makes sense. I'm certain of this. Then, when contradicting evidence shows up, it creates this discomfort. Cognitive dissonance kicks in. And one of two things is going to happen. Either the belief is going to stay the same, number 3, or the microphone was exploding. So what? But we have new evidence. New evidence indicates it's something more sophisticated than that. It's still the old story, despite the new evidence. And so this is, to me, a fascinating challenge as the person who presents evidence that most people haven't seen. And even on my YouTube channel, my videos only get a fraction of the views that some of these other investigators get. They're getting hundreds of thousands, and I get 3,000, 4,000 maybe. So when I do appear as a guest on another podcast and share this new evidence, it's like putting people into a state of shock when they see it. And so here's an example. All right, so this is a clip of Chris Martenson talking about the Charlie Kirk event. And you're not going to see Charlie Kirk get shot and bleed out, so that's not in this video, so everybody can relax. But Chris Martenson is going to assess just 2 frames of the Charlie Kirk shooting in this clip. And I want you guys to listen to what he has to say.
This is 1 frame, 1/30th of a second, because this one was shot at 30 FPS, 1/30th of a second before the shot happened. And then here's the first frame after the shot. And you can notice something. Well, first, the microphone's still there, so no exploding mics. That's done. If the mic was exploding, explosions happen at 20 to 30,000 feet per second, it would not still be in frame. Okay. This thing here, some people have interpreted as a puff of smoke. It's not. It's just a very rapidly moving piece of T-shirt. It's just obviously blurry because it's moving too fast. But you can notice here right away, if you look at his neckline, it's like twice as big. Like everything's just huge. Now, why is that? That's called a high-speed cavitation event. This is what it looks like. Here's somebody shooting a 300 blackout, and when the bullet hits, it goes, expands out. And that happens in just 1/1000th of a second. It's very fast. So to capture it on video is kind of unusual because that's capturing at 30 frames a second, and you need it to capture this thing.
And I agree with everything he's saying, despite the fact that I've accused him of being a limited hangout in the past. And I'm sticking with it. So this is the thing about these really effective limited hangouts, is they will give you 85, 88%, 91% good information. And not talk about the vital evidence that is game-changing in each and every one of these stories. Each and every cover-up is a piece of pivotal, vital evidence that changes everything. And in some cases, like in COVID, there's half a dozen different pieces of evidence that change basically the whole story. That all come together. But everything that Chris Martenson is saying here is absolutely true. Hydrostatic cavitation, absolutely spot on, 100% true. The microphone is still clipped to the shirt 1 frame after he's been shot. That debunks it. That's it. He's been shot, the microphone's still on his shirt. The end. Now, the other question is, has anybody else shared or studied footage of anything exploding to compare it? All right, so we just watched this happen with 1 frame, but has anybody said, well, let's take a look at something exploding and see if it looks at, should look identical, right? Well, that's what we can do here. So let's take a look at, this is the exploding pager scenario. I guess this was in Beirut, and they sent these pre-configured pagers to members of Hezbollah, I believe. And let's take a look at what happened here. Okay, so as that happens, we see a puff of smoke. We see that smoke billow away from the leg. All right. And we just don't see anything like that when Charlie Kirk is shot. So the challenging thing here is that if there are people who conceivably are professionals whose job it is to help you think you're participating in an investigation, when in fact they're making sure that you never go anywhere near the real aspect of it. And they do that by ridiculing it or whatever. All right, so everything here is spot on. I can't take issue with any of it. But he won't talk about Hades. And he won't talk about the UAVs all over the place. Why not? Why would you ignore that? Seems like vital evidence. Given we're trying to figure out where the shot's coming from, and he's the one saying it looks like it's coming from up here. All right. Spot on. All right, let's talk about confirmation bias. Confirmation bias is after you've created this belief, microphone was exploding, it wasn't helicopters in Vegas, it was drones in Vegas shooting at people. Another belief would be Ralph Barrick and something, and they've been working on COVID for a long time, and David Martin related nonsense. So as you form these beliefs, you tend to focus on the evidence that supports those beliefs, and in many cases regurgitate the stuff you heard from these people. And when you are faced with new evidence, when new evidence comes forward, there's a tendency to either discount it, deride it, ignore it, because it's going to lead to cognitive dissonance if the new evidence contradicts what you think. It's like you're thinking to yourself, oh no, I don't have time for this right now. I'm going to have to rethink this whole thing. And so confirmation bias, you tend to gravitate towards the people, the stories, the entertainment that supports the beliefs that you've already had. And all these contradicting inputs, all the new stuff that shows up, makes belief perseverance more likely, because confirmation bias and cognitive dissonance go hand in hand somewhat. So we start with a belief. We notice supporting information that supports our belief, and anything that disagrees with it, it's like, that can't be. And the question is, why does that happen? Why do people, why do some people embrace the new stuff and some people dismiss it? Why is there a difference? And how important is that difference? And we're going to get to that. All right, anchoring bias is huge. We just talked about that in that little video clip. And this is getting ahead of the story. And, people who have a big platform on YouTube or a big platform on X have the ability to get ahead of the story, not necessarily with the right information. Good example there would be like Dan Bongino. Big platform, a lot of people watch him. I think he got one thing right in the years I've been keeping an eye on what he's doing. So getting ahead of the story is real important. And when people are subjected to those early narratives, Stephen Paddock, lone gunman, he's dead currently. And that's the first thing you hear. That's the anchoring bias. That sets the tone. Stephen Paddock shot everybody from the window. Well, now any other story has to supersede that, and that's in your mind. And then we get to availability heuristic bias, and you see a ton of this. This is where people form all these opinions about what happened, and they haven't seen all the evidence yet. So when the new evidence shows up, they've already kind of put a stake in the ground. And that gets real uncomfortable for them. Right? So new evidence shows up and they're like, oh. Right? So an example here would be people think a microphone exploded rather than Charlie Kirk got shot. And they haven't seen the evidence of all the stuff flying around. And when they see that, it's like, oh man. And some people feel like, oh man, I'm such an idiot. And there's a lot of that. And the thing is that you're being lied to by professionals. So you really shouldn't feel like an idiot. These guys have big money. I do this for a living and I got fooled for 3.5 years. But the litmus test, the easy way to determine who's for real, who's a shill, who's not a shill, who's for real, is who will talk about the vital evidence, the game-changing evidence. All right, what are we looking at here? The Johns Hopkins map of COVID. Why is it relevant? Well, where did COVID start? China. Right? China virus, right? What's the biggest city in China? Shanghai. So wouldn't Anderson Cooper, David Muir, Sean Hannity, Tucker Carlson be curious, well, how many people are dead in Shanghai? Because 2 years into the pandemic, what you're looking at here, this is January 5th, 2022. The virus was first identified January 9th, 2020. So January 5th, 2022, 2 years later, there's still not 5,000 people dead in all of China, according to Johns Hopkins. Now, why would Johns Hopkins publish that? Why would Johns Hopkins say, less than 5,000 dead in China 2 years into this? And if we look closely at how many people are dead in Shanghai, 7. And next thing you know, this slogan appears. Well, China's lying. No, China wasn't lying. But people clung to that. Why did people cling to China's lying? Because people had already formed their opinion, availability, heuristic bias, without seeing the data. Now the data shows up. It ruins your beliefs. You were told China was on fire with this virus and everything's locked down and, oh my God, they're falling down in the streets. That did happen, by the way. But it wasn't the virus that you see tracking on the screen right now. The virus you see tracking on the screen right now is for SARS-CoV-2. SARS-CoV-2 didn't kill 500 million pigs in China. That was a different virus. Not this one. 500 million pigs. 500 million pigs died. And 1/4 of the poultry was wiped out. Not by COVID. Not by COVID. Something else. That's not a theory, right? We know about the outbreak of influenza in Hubei in December 2019. We know all about that from CNN. That's not a theory. So the question becomes, why would anyone who's legitimate ignore the reporting of Johns Hopkins China doesn't have 5,000 dead. And there's not 10 dead in Shanghai 2 years into the pandemic. Meaning for the entire 2-year period leading up to this, there weren't 5,000 dead. There weren't 10 dead in Shanghai. So you could have reported this at any point, 18 months in, 20 months in. It still wasn't 5,000. Still wasn't 10 dead in Shanghai. And nobody thought that was relevant. Not just the big names, right? Not just Sean Hannity and Anderson Cooper, David Mead, not just the big names. But the people who are real popular now doing investigations didn't seem to think this was important. Now, why would that be? Shanghai had 7 people dead 2 years into the pandemic. And the best they could come up with was China is lying? Based on what? Why are they lying about Shanghai and not Wuhan? As of July 9th of 2020, year 1 of this, Ohio already had 3,000 dead. Hong Kong had 132 dead as of December 2020. How does Hong Kong have 132 dead and Ohio has 3,000 dead months earlier? And this doesn't make the news. It's not that it doesn't make the news, it's that it doesn't make Dan Bongino's show. It doesn't make anybody's show. Nobody ends up talking about this. Laura Ingraham mentions it once, back in April, and never mentions it again. And meanwhile, they're killing chickens left and right. 1.3 million chickens to be culled at a bird flu detected at an Ohio farm. So what happens is anchoring bias, the first thing you hear, forms that initial interpretation. Okay, this is what's happening. Some dude, Stephen Paddock, shot out the window, shot everybody. Normalcy bias slows your ability to interpret something that indicates no. This is different from anything we've seen before. Right? So this is when people say it's just fireworks. It's just fireworks. So normalcy bias, it means your ability then to interpret what's actually happening has been impaired already. You don't want to accept it. And when contradiction arrives because of new evidence, whether it's the maps, whether it's a meteor crater, cognitive dissonance makes changing your belief totally unpleasant. You got to rethink everything. You got to rewire everything. It's like having to redo a project in your mind. Right? Imagine you're playing a game of chess and it is just an awesome game. And you're all the way, it's like, oh my God, we're like, 3 moves away from check. And the board gets knocked over. You gotta start all over again. It's that letting the wind out of your sails feeling that everything I thought, everything I posted was wrong. I'm gonna look like a moron. I thought it was an exploding microphone for 8 weeks or whatever. I'm gonna look like an idiot. And so people then head towards confirmation bias. Let me double check all the evidence that supports what I think. And this is where we see belief perseverance. People tend to cling to those initial beliefs, or in some cases, it's the beliefs of members of society. In other words, the belief that most people are on board with is the belief that you're going to be the least ridiculed for. And that's pretty common. Another thing I see pretty often is when I'll share new evidence with someone on a podcast or whatever I'm doing. I guess that's mostly what I do. So when I'm a guest on a podcast and I'll share new evidence with the host, a group of people, whatever it is, it seems that many people feel this need to explain it. But they just saw it for the first time 10 seconds ago, 20 seconds ago, 30 seconds ago. So this looks a little bit like Dunning-Kruger, but Dunning-Kruger is more geared towards people who are just uneducated. And that's not what this is. So it looks like Dunning-Kruger, but it's not. But it's very interesting. And what this is this need to do what's called fast cognition. And we really want to take stuff and put it into we want to put square pegs in square holes. We want to put round pegs in round holes. We want to say, oh, that's just like a red-winged blackbird that can speak like a parrot. We want to use things we already understand to compartmentalize new concepts. So when I bring new evidence to the table, drones in Hades at Charlie Kirk, or meteor crater regarding COVID, it's just, it's totally weird stuff. And oftentimes people feel this need to explain it, or to provide some sort of, cover explanation. The chimneys, there were chimneys and a lot of cell phones got canceled. And where do people come up with the need to come up with these explanations for these things that they just heard 10 seconds earlier? And it's not arrogance. It's the brain is trying to make sense of something. It's kind of like the magic trick that we did at the beginning of the show. It doesn't make sense. And when it's just a magic trick, it's kind of goofy and ha ha ha. When it's murder, it's people trying to figure it out. They're like, wait. I was told there was an outbreak in China. What do you mean there's not 10 people dead in Shanghai? What do you mean there's not 5,000 people dead in China? How come that wasn't on the news? If that was true, it would have been on the news. No, not necessarily. Depends on who's running the news. So I see this frequently. This is this need that people have to explain something they've just seen for the first time. And so there are all these drivers behind all this, right? The discomfort, the pattern completion. The brain is constantly trying to predict stuff. And when new evidence shows up, it's trying to make that work. And if it can't, the cognitive dissonance kicks in no matter what, because we're changing everything. So this is tough stuff. And then, you got the social issue of it, which is, do I want to go out on a limb on this new concept necessarily? Am I going to look like a moron in public? And so this is where the Dunning-Kruger thing, it's kind of like a twist on Dunning-Kruger, because we see highly educated people do this a lot. So we saw a lot of this with COVID. We saw doctors, we saw PhDs, masters in public health, when faced with all that H7N9 evidence, it's like the scene from Blade Runner with Pris, when Pris starts freaking out. It's like that. It's like everybody, they're going crazy because they've formed all these opinions and they've gone out in public and made statements despite, the availability heuristic aspect of it, right? They didn't have all the evidence, and yet they started putting a stake in the ground. And so highly educated, intelligent people will come up with these explanations 10 seconds after hearing something. Looks a lot like Dunning-Kruger, but what it really is they're trying to calibrate. And it seems that highly intelligent people and the ability to calibrate are not necessarily a hand-in-hand thing. And from my experience and what I've seen, what I've experienced, the ability to recalibrate is pretty rare. And in fact, I'd have to say the guy that I think recalibrates better than anybody I've met in the 9 years I've been doing all this stuff is probably Dale Comstock. He takes in new data, processes it, and is already on to what that could mean faster than anybody I've ever had a conversation with. And he does it again and again because we've talked about a lot of different cover-ups. So he has this ability to recalibrate. And this is different. He's obviously an intelligent guy. He's a PhD and all that. But everybody else that I've talked to, MDs, also intelligent people, that really struggle with recalibrating based on the new evidence that's presented. And so when you see the difference between someone who does and someone who doesn't, then it becomes way more apparent. And so getting this opportunity to do a bunch of shows with Dale over the course of the last year or two, I share this new information. He's like, whoa. So wait a second. So that would mean this, and this would mean this, and da, 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 da. And it's like he's already calculating, figuring out, how this means everything would go together again differently. And I've never seen, quite frankly, I don't know that I've seen anybody else do this. So this notion of calibration and intelligence are not necessarily the same. This calibration thing is a different skill. We see people who are highly intelligent that when faced with new evidence find it very difficult to recalibrate. And this notion of coherence is an extremely strong incentive for the brain. When things aren't adding up, when things don't make sense, that's like a cognitive dissonance feeling. We don't like that at all. We like when, we know where our keys are, we know where our wallet is, we know where our phone is. We like that. We can't find our keys. We don't like that. Coherence. We like everything to be coherent. We like everything to be in place for the most part. And when things aren't, that feels like cognitive dissonance. The other thing is that some people have expertise. So this is where the doctors kind of have a stake in the game. So people who have expertise will come to a podcast or something, and what am I supposed to say? I did a podcast with Dr. Stephen Quay, who wrote the paper on H7N9, whose research assistant helped us realize what was going on, that the virus was there already. So this kind of supported it. And very difficult, I believe, for him to sort of embrace this new evidence, given that he was so close to it himself. Right? So people with expertise, it's even more challenging, I think, for them. And of course, motivation and identity matter, right? So if this person is trying to sell a book, they don't want to look like a dope. So, what's their motivation, right? For me, I just want to share evidence. I mean, that's all I ever do. The other thing is I never sit on evidence. I've heard this term mentioned recently, and somebody said I've been sitting on this for a while. If I get new evidence, man, I'm making a show at 4:00 in the morning. I can't sit on evidence. I don't know if I'm going to wake up in the morning tomorrow. That's why I sleep with a machine gun. So I can't wait. I got to put everything out as fast as I can, as I figure it out as it comes to me. So this notion of people don't have the time to investigate these things fully is somewhat true, but at the same time, it doesn't take that long to click on Shanghai or show an interest in, well, how many people are dead in Hong Kong? And just ask ChatGPT. Couldn't do that in 2020, but we can do that now. And the fact that there's no intellectual curiosity, is that real? Or is that, these fake characters from the signature reduction program trying to cover their tracks by acting disinterested? So we've got this full circle mechanism of biases that basically drives people to this belief set that they started with, the anchoring bias and belief perseverance. And so confirmation bias helps booster it, but belief perseverance is really kind of the enemy, kind of the issue. And this is despite new evidence to the contrary. People clinging to earlier beliefs. And, I'm trying to help people understand why it happens. Is it a sign of weakness? I mean, it's highly psychological. I mean, these biases and things are, people aren't even aware of them. So, it's hard to point a finger at somebody and say, you've got belief perseverance. It's not like that. Again, when I experience this cognitive dissonance with the H7 and 9, it's like a physical feeling. I mean, you feel nauseous, you feel dizzy, you feel, to use Trump's term, discombobulated. It's a really dizzying, nauseating feeling when everything has changed and you find out that, your husband's been sleeping with the tennis instructor. It's like, what? That's totally different from what I thought was happening. And along comes cognitive dissonance. So the full circle mechanism almost makes it impossible to avoid for people who are susceptible to it. And, there's like a breed of people that just calibrate and calibrate and calibrate. And I don't know what that is. I just see, I recognize it in Dale. I recognize it in me. I don't see it in many people. And I don't know what to tell you about it. It seems like a rare thing. It seems more rare than most of the other stuff. Let me play this clip of Ian. This is Ian Carroll. Let's see what he had to say.
So, as a general rule of thumb, anytime that someone gets shot in public in America and it's a big conspiracy and it seems like we're being lied to, it's probably worth following along with John Cullen. He broke a whole bunch of the stuff wide open about the Las Vegas shooting back in 2017, and he certainly is getting involved in this one. John can be a bit of a pain. He can be a bit of an ass online, but he does some damn fine work. And he has been tracking a couple of developments on this story that basically no one else is talking about. And whether that's for some suspicious reason or because it's a little too nuanced and esoteric and people just haven't quite caught up to where John is at yet, I don't know. But let's take a quick look at some of these flying things that John is finding. Not just John, but John is at the front of this. So I'm pretty sure that John has found a CIA spy plane to take a flight over there that is sort of in the pipeline for air-launched drones, because they've been finding a whole bunch of what look like drones in the footage, like I think more than 10 instances at this point.
All right, so that's an example of what I believe to be a newer, more nuanced version of the catch and kill. Whereas the older version of the catch and kill was somebody like a Mindy who would then deride and, have nothing nice to say about me and my work, which didn't really lend a whole lot of credibility. And so I'm wondering, did they recalibrate back at headquarters? And the new catch and kill consists of a light acknowledgement, but no engagement. In other words, I've never done a podcast with Ian. I've had nothing. Baron Coleman hasn't reached out. Let me play this video. This is Baron Coleman talking.
If you want to know more about it, a guy named John Cullen did a great series of YouTube videos on this. And he cites the record, like he shows the evidence. This is not conspiracy theory stuff. The only thing that might be a conspiracy theorist is we purposefully put it in Chinese chickens so that it would destroy them. That's the only part that's a conspiracy theory. The rest of it's just fact.
All right, so hypothetically, let's say that Ian Carroll and Baron Coleman are both doing a catch and kill. How would that be? They just recommended my work. Well, they're getting hundreds of thousands of views on their videos. And when Baron Coleman recommends my work, a couple hundred people come over and check it out. That's it. All right, so my channel still, after 9 years, is at 85,000 subscribers. Baron Coleman's been publishing for less than a year, has a couple 100,000 already. And when he does a video, it gets hundreds of thousands of views, tens of thousands of people watching live. I've been doing this for 9 years. So is this a new, softer, gentler catch and kill, where, for example, Baron Coleman's now talking about 8, 7, and 9, telling the whole 8, 7, and 9 story? Does he become the new, guy that you would have on the show to talk about 8, 7, and 9? Will Candace have Baron on to talk about 8, 7, and 9? Will Baron do a show with Ian to talk about 8, 7, and 9? And they cut me out of the picture. So this is a new, softer, gentler catch and kill where they acknowledge the work and say, hey, this guy has amazing work. We're not going to have him on the show, right? And if you can remember to check him out, you should check him out, but it's kind of odd. Confirmation bias, seeking and interpreting, remembering the information that supports your beliefs. Belief perseverance, continuing to hold the belief even after strong contradictory evidence. And then the backfire effect. Some people dig in and double down and really stick to those claims despite it. And again, it's about the vital evidence. It's about what evidence is key. Is every airplane at the Charlie Kirk thing equally important? Is the airplane going to Fort Huachuca? How is that more important than the plane that's at 200 feet and 115 knots? So understanding which evidence is vital and which is incidental seems to be a weakness amongst at least the American audience. I can't speak for you guys in Australia, New Zealand, Europe, Japan, the rest of the world, but what's with this inability to differentiate between incidental evidence and vital evidence? Is it SSRI based? I wouldn't be surprised. One more time. You've got 2 seconds to look at, memorize, and it's gone. Now, many of you know how I'm doing this or how it's done. I can't take credit for it. It's been around for a long time. But what some people see and what other people see is different. And how you would explain it to somebody is different. And so Let me show you what I see. So when I see the first batch of cards, I see 2 6s, 2 7s, and 2 8s. Okay? 2 6s, 2 7s, and 2 8s. And when we go to the second, I see 2 6s, 1 7, and 2 8s. And therefore a 7 must have been removed. Right? So depending on your perspective and depending on how you look at it and depending on how you're kind of guided through it, you can have a different takeaway. Two 6s, 2 7s, 2 8s. And now there's 2 6s, 1 7, and 2 8s. So it must have taken, but if your card was a 6 or an 8, I still got it right. And that's because the second batch of cards has nothing to do with the first batch of cards. Just like the COVID hearing has nothing to do with the pandemic that killed 7 million people. I'm John Cullen. Thanks for joining. Hypothetically speaking.
The deception with tact. Just what are you trying to say? You got a black face, which irritates. Communicate, pull out your body piece. You see dimensions into. State your case with black or white. But when one little cross leads to shots, scratch your teeth. You run for cover so discreet. Why don't they do what they say? Say what you mean. One thing leads to another. You told me something wrong. I know I listened too long, but then one thing leads to another. The impression that you sound horses in and out like a sail. But the long face that you see comes from living close to your fears. This is up and I'm up, but you're running out of sight. You've seen your name on the walls. And when one little bomb leads to sharpness of beat, you run for cover in this heat. Why don't they do what they say? Say what they mean. One thing leads to another. You told me something wrong. I know I listened too loud, but then one thing leads to another. Yeah, yeah, yeah. Then it's easy to believe somebody's been lying to me. But when the wrong word goes in the right ear, I know you've been lying to me. It's getting rough off the cuff. I've got to say enough's enough. Break out the harder he falls. But when the wrong antidote is like a bomb down the throat, you run from cover in the heat. Why don't they do what they say? Say